fish tank. Used to go forward and back the interstitial spaces for the cells, tissue cells, and so forth. So if those aren't renewed, you know, that's where it's the body's like an ecosystem. If that does not get renewed, you know what happens to a fish tank when you don't have a filter on the front of the cord. Okay, fine. I'm used to that too. I like it when people want me to get complicated. But how many of you just want to be taught what to do to heal? Okay, it's a trick question. How many of you want to take the time and effort to learn the science behind every single healing art known to man so you can come up with your own self-help speed healing techniques? Great. Okay, come on, everyone. That should be everyone. All right. How many of you want to learn how to speed up the healing of injuries and how to conquer cancer or reverse heart disease and any other degenerative disease? There we go. That's what we're going to do. The historical interview I couldn't play. That's all right. We're going to miss a lot of things because we don't have time. I used to refer to my father's theory. Some people refer to it as interstitial lymphatic occlusion, as this is a theory for every degenerative disease known to man, so to speak. But I began to call it the theory of ecological origins about 5 years ago. And then I guess, you know, I never stopped trying to come up with ways to be able to teach people what this is about and where it's going. It starts with applied lymphology and it goes into cellular ecology. Cellular ecology, how many of you have heard of cellular ecology? You might hear a couple of times they toss it around. It's a missing discipline. It should be in every college and university, but it's not. It started with Antoine Béchamp about 200 years ago. And what are we living in today? We have a Pasteurian medical dark ages. That's what I refer to. We're surrounded by Pasteurians. But Pasteur, turns out, didn't even prove what he claimed, what they gave him credit for. Pasteur was a way to bury Béchamp. That's about it. Béchamp was the genius. Anyone who goes to the French academies and does the research will find that out. But the Antoine Béchamp, he knew that if the terrain was altered negatively, that organisms would adapt and they could become virulent and then proliferate. So they say the terrain is everything. We're going to learn more about the terrain, how it's maintained, how to renew it with applied lymphology than you would with anything else in the world. From there, we're getting into energy medicine. It opens the doors wide. It just blows the doors right off of it because our bodies, every cell, is a generator. It's an electrical generator. It works like a battery. When it generates, it's kind of like a hydroelectric generator. In the process of generating the power for your eyes to see, for your heart to beat, for your brain to think and do everything you do as fast as it does, it also generates a field that negates decay, and that same field also is absolutely essential for circulation. How do you get more significant than that? I don't know. I don't think you can. But if you're talking about frequencies and you're talking about how people live longer, 9,000 feet up because of the increased ions in the air, which they also did that study with cats, and they proved that definitely it increases the circulation. Well, without this terrain that every cell is constantly busy generating, the field of these electrons, you've got nothing for those frequencies to go across. So it's kind of like having stones in a stream. You want to get across the stream, the stones will help. Without those electrons coating every healthy cell, well, let's put it this way, with the electrons, everything is just 10 times, 100 times more efficient and effective. So, I realized that I wanted to explain to people, they always wanted it in a nutshell. So you're going to get the very best nutshell I've ever come up with, hopefully. That's what I want to do here. It's my whole objective is to get that on video. And you look at the word circulation and the word filtration and see how there's a circle around those words. That's because with this program, you'll learn more about circulation and filtration than any other program on the face of the earth that I know about. Now, most everyone is looking at assimilation and elimination. We've done a lot there. Tons of information on that. What happens when you put all that together is you come up with the most sophisticated approach to healthcare imaginable. And if I'd be boasting or something, I'd say that the most sophisticated program that there'll ever be. But it's really starting with wisdom. It enables you to have a lot of wisdom and look at things in perspective and to acknowledge all of these variables. Because in the case of every disease, each and every one of these variables is having an impact on those cells. So the more of those the more ecological dilemmas that we can resolve, the better off our cells are going to be. And then up from there, you have triggers. Basically, cells are constantly receiving instruction, and they are constantly adapting to their environments. It sort of sends them a message. These organisms can say, okay, the body's dead, time to break it down. You don't want that. But when the environment's renewed and the cells have those properties there, they get a whole other message. If you eat raw food, you get, our bodies work electrically. You eat, where do you get more electrical nutrition, so to speak? Some people are misusing those terms, but where do you get more electrical nutrition than from raw food? Nowhere else. What happens? What is it really that we don't like about raw food? Maybe it's oxygen and the electron content. I don't know. Why do we have to cook the food? Why does it taste so much better when it's cooked? We need to really look at all that, and it's not easy. We're all going to have challenges. No matter how much we learn, there's going to be challenges. And what we need to start doing is stop judging other people by their appearances or whatever it may be, whatever problems they may have, chemical imbalances and things. So we're going to come up with solutions. We got to be able to motivate people. And I'll admit it right now, that our materials from here need more motivational types of, and so anyone that wants to help with that, great. But we're gonna come up with more motivation and more support for people to apply what they're learning and be able to really make the changes that they need to make. One of the things that's really been helping me is just eating. I made up my mind that I was going to eat 2 grapefruits every morning, and I did that about 3 weeks or a month ago. And it's just been, I want to testify, it's been absolutely astounding, just that alone, just 2 grapefruits every morning. That's very alkalizing. But if you view the body as an ecosystem, all trillion, you've all read it probably by now. Let's go on to the next one. There's an ideal or optimal environment for healthy cellular function where the body is perfectly healthy. And in fact, you can't have disease in the, if you look at the flyer that you've got a illustration of the healthy dry state and a swampy degenerated condition. The top of that is a blood vessel, and the bottom is a lymph vessel. I'll get to that in just a second. I'm jumping the gun. Within the bloodstream, you have 3 quarts of water that goes through the blood every 60 seconds, and within that 60 seconds, the whole 3 quarts of blood disperses in and out of the bloodstream 80 times. 1001, all 3 quarts just went in and out that fast. Is that mind-boggling? It is. There's that much fluid exchange for our cell. When you times it by 80, you've got 240,000 milliliters per minute, so it's a pretty fast-moving system, where the lymph system is usually only about 1.6, 1.7. It can go up to 20 milliliters per second during exercise, much higher with our techniques. There's also an unhealthy environment where healthy cellular function is not possible. That's what I was talking about. And I do have a laser pointer. Cool. I had to bring my own. Yeah. But in here, this is where the trapped plasma proteins have occurred. This is the lymph vessel. It parallels the blood vessel. Why does the lymph have to parallel the blood vessels? Because the blood leaks its contents, and I'll get to that in a second. You'll know all the things that makes that happen. I call it excessive filtration. But this is like the diffusion process, and all that water is really traveling from arterial to venous. And in order for the cells to get the proper amount of oxygen, they have to be held tight and close together. And this lymph system is a vacuum. And actually what we have is numerous dustpans in areas where the plasma proteins can accumulate throughout this body. And then these lymph terminals, it's a one-way system. The lymph terminals then have a greater, they have greater amounts of this fluid which to pull out from around the cells. So anyway, this condition right here is acidic and anaerobic. There's this right here. Is the dry state. This right here is just to mention that how the cells generate that power. They have a high amount of sodium in the blood. There's a high amount of potassium inside the cell. And I'll get to something else here. Well, it's a rotation of that. See, what happens is the blood has a lot of sodium and a very low amount of potassium, and it's irrigating it constantly. So it doesn't take any energy at all for the potassium in the cell to say, hey, I'm seeking balance and I'm leaving the cell. The sodium from the blood is saying, hey, I'm seeking balance and I will just enter the cell. So there's an opposite concentration here. And this is what results in life as we know it. So it is important to understand is the rotation of those elements that generates the electrical energy and the power. But half of it requires absolutely no energy because nature is trying to balance us out, and we'll balance out when we're dead. The other half, and that's cool because half of the work's being done by a law of nature. The other half requires energy, and then so the cell's constantly forcing that sodium back out and the potassium back in. Pretty cool. But, okay, causes of excess fluid buildup are heavy physical exertion, shock or stress, poison or injury. Lymphatic failure is caused by sedentary lifestyle, infection, interstitial lymphatic occlusion. This is, if you look at that illustration on your flyer, that's the swampy lake. You have oxygen deficiencies, fermented glucose cells generate heat, that's for inflammation. Acid, clustering, colliding, hysteric hindrance, which is opposite of zeta potential. Free radical pathology, which is, everyone should know what that is, oxidation. Poisons and toxins, biological transmutation. That's where the cells are really just adapting to a very harsh environment, finding some way to survive. Minerals fall out of solution. Of course, on the other side, you have an abundance of oxygen, fresh glucose. Cells generate power. It's alkaline. Zeta, you have a lot of zeta potential, and that's what you need for circulation. It negates decay. It's clean and pure. The immune cells can go in and fight. I'll show you more about that real soon. Delicate chemical balance. Cells generate electricity. They generate electric energy and power. Life is the generation and organization of energy, and our health, strength, and endurance is dependent on the energy currents that run through the body. Our bodies function electrically. So if I were to ask you, what is health? A lot of people say, oh, health is wealth. No, health is what? But health is energy. It didn't come up, did it? Health is energy. My dad would get people to answer that. Health is energy. Yeah, right. And so the electricity in plants is, see, my father did hundreds of hours of research. He had a stack of Scientific Americans this high. And finally he found this article, Electricity in Plants. It was the last one they had. He happened to get it. If he hadn't got that, you know what? This whole science might not even exist. The life process has been found to generate electric fields in every organism that has been examined. The delicately balanced distribution of inorganic salts, minerals in and around a living cell, whether plant or animal, accounts for its electrical properties. I had Galvani on there because my dad never mentioned him, but he's credited for proving that animal electricity. So it's pretty cool stuff, anyone that wants to do research. Basic cellular function, 0.9 millimeter volt batteries, lightning fast, high potassium in the cell, low sodium outside the cell. Okay, I should have waited till I got to this to explain that, because this does it a lot better. You can see where there's a positive charge on the inside, negative on the outside. It takes ATP for those generators to work. And you don't have ATP unless you get oxygen with glucose. The glucose goes down to insulin, the insulin goes into ATP. Says that as in a battery, opposites attract. Positively charged ions move toward a negative charge and vice versa. And the surge of ions across the cell membrane generates tiny electrical currents that orchestrate a multitude of bodily functions. ATP is the fuel, like I said. If the pumps work properly, it not only keeps the sodium-potassium balance right, it also keeps the calcium, magnesium, and every other essential electrolyte in balance and needed amino acids into the cell. Oh, by the way, there's a whole thing with pinocytosis. Anyway, that's how cells increase in size and divide. It won't happen unless they take in. Hope I mentioned that some more. See this down here? This is oxygen. This is a 4-word equation. My father had a 31-step equation. It was life and death. It was an equation for life. The other side, it was an equation for death. You could say that's an equation for healing or an equation for degenerative disease. But this was a way to simplify it. So we got it down to 4 words. Oxygen pumps, electricity, and power. And, okay, now you got, like I say, everywhere you have blood, you must have lymph channels or lymphatic vessels because the blood leaks its contents. What we have is it's like a tree. The roots go down to the feet, branches go up into the head, tree trunk is in the chest. This is the thoracic duct. That's like the tree trunk. It inflates, and then when the lungs push on it, it shoots like a geyser into through the subclavian vein. My father was in the room when Jack Shields showed this film with all the past presidents of the International Society of Lymphology. Well, not all of them, but some. And they were just shaking their heads. They couldn't believe it. They had this guy on a treadmill, and they were filming where the thoracic duct dumps into the subclavian vein. While he was on the treadmill, they couldn't really see anything. Of course, I believe it was just accumulating to that point where, but when they had him take a deep breath, it shot like a geyser. My father was interviewed by Anthony Robbins, so any of you that learned that from Anthony Robbins. He came from my dad, but anyway. Point is that if my father hadn't been in the room, hardly anyone would know that deep breathing activates lymphatic vessels because they didn't really go publishing that and trying to get that information to the general public. Well, that's the central propulsion of your entire lymphatic system is deep breathing, and yawning is the ultimate deep breath, and it even activates the cerebral spinal fluid, renews the cerebral spinal fluid. You have to renew your CSF about 4 to 5 times every day, and I'll get more into that a little bit. The lymphatic system, like treatment, okay. There we go. Check valves. Okay. Dr. H.S. Mayerson. Could you move? Yeah, let me see. Oh, it's just not coming up. All right. Dr. H.S. Mayerson was on my father's advisory board till the day he died. He was the one who got that whole, it was the government and the army. They were trying to find out why soldiers died in battlefields from wounds which should not have been fatal. They were researching death from shock. H.S. Marrison was on that research team, so was Cecil K. Drinker. But H.S. Marrison, it was in his home in New Orleans where the ISL met. So he helped found the ISL. And he wrote this article called The Lymphatic System. And it says, reveals that Dr. Marrison's research where he tagged the blood proteins with radioactive iodine. Didn't I say Cecil K. Drinker did that? They were both working together. Anyway, and then Marrison was lecturing for Arthur C. Guyton. Arthur C. Guyton wrote the most widely used textbook of physiology in the world. And his newer texts, his old ones, it's filled full of this information on circulation, the whole front of it. And then Arthur C. Guyton, he made the dry state discovery. He put it in his appendix of the 5th edition. Just as a last-minute thing, he placed the collapsible plastic capsules fenestrated with many tiny holes that enabled the fluid around the cell to exchange with the fluid in the capsule. Before that, they were using needles to try and measure the tissue pressure. Of course, you know, a needle they got a 0 pressure, so that's what they thought it was. When Arthur C. Guyton did that test, he found that the cells are pulled tight. He found that it was a vacuum. So if I were to ask you, what's the ultimate cell environment? What's the ideal cellular environment? The answer to that question would be that there is no cellular. The ideal cell environment is one that does not exist. It's a void. It's a vacuum. The whole lymph system is a vacuum system. It works vacuumously. And I made myself stupid, Nelson. But the whole thing is working like a vacuum. It actually pulls the cells tight and close together, and that way the bloodstream can act as the cell environment. So really, God didn't miss a trick. And the more we learn about this, it's just amazing. We're amazed that we're going to be. So we got AMA's official journal. Marrison published his research, and that's where it said what I read to you before over here. It says that if the lymphatic system did not carry a large portion of the remaining seepage back to the bloodstream, we would all bleed to death internally in a matter of hours. Loss of blood proteins through capillary walls would be particularly disastrous. But for the prompt retrieval of the protein by the lymphatic system, this constant loss would spell swift catastrophe. Over a long period of time, we can have serious ecological dilemmas. Okay, I just read all that. But thus, this great river of mystery, the lymphatic system, may well hold the key to dozens of disease riddles. That is why it is getting ever-increasing research attention. Inevitably, discoveries of vital importance to all will be made. And they have been made. It's not just the key to 2 or 3 dozen diseases. It holds the key to every degenerative disease there is, and discoveries of vital importance to all have been made. In Scientific American, Dr. H.S. Marrison said teachers and writers of textbooks for medical schools continue to maintain that healthy blood capillaries did not leak protein and water. It was in an effort to clarify this point that I undertook an investigation of lymph and the lymphatics some 15 years ago. So he started in 1948 and finished in 1963, and what are we still learning today in medical textbooks? Before 1930, they didn't think it was possible for blood proteins to leave the bloodstream. Starling's hypothesis was based on that false assumption. He said the bulk of filtration was equal to the bulk of absorption. Well, that was not true. Another thing they say is that the transfer of oxygen to cells is not dependent on the fluid shifts across the capillary membrane for simple molecules diffusion down a concentration gradient suffices. That's a lie, obviously. Why would we have all 3 quarts of fluid diffusing back and forth 80 times per minute if oxygen could just take itself to your cell? Sorry. Old theory is still published. What they said was another type of plasma protein, albumin, It said that they're prevented from escaping the bloodstream. So they're still publishing, even in 1989, much later, they were still publishing research that conflicted with what they found to explain death from shock. And like everything, they're trying to blame the immune system on the damage that's done from shock. Even they're trying to blame inflammation on the immune system. It's utterly amazing how much arrogance they have. But shock hypoalbuminemia, from 1954 to 1963, H.S. Marison was on the shock committee. 53, 56, and 60, Encyclopedia Americana published the shock research. And then what? Some interesting things about shock. Kills about half the septic shock. That's from infection. Kills about half the people that get it. So it's a real serious thing. 50% of everyone in here has a chance of dying from that. Well, no, I can't say that. 50% of the people who get it have a chance from dying from it. They came up with a drug, and they're always trying to come up with a new supposed need for the drug, and then come up with a new drug. Am I right? But this drug supposedly is the one I was talking about, but it attacks the immune system, knocks it out, so the immune system won't do the damage it supposedly does after you're in shock. So right after you've been in a lot of shock and you've had your cells, all the water trapped plasma proteins that are around your cells, half of your blood can be around, plasma proteins can be around your cells, stuck there, waiting for the lymph system to retrieve it. They think the solution is to knock the heck out of your white blood cells so they can't attack you. It's pretty scary, and they want to make a law that says they can do that without your consent. Look how happy these people are. I want you to see the little grins on their face. Look, he's looking at it. What do you think they're thinking about? I think it's their bank account. Shock. This is a lot of information about shock. It's interesting that they said that they credit the kidneys right here. Quoted the kidneys for retaining the fluid in the circulatory system, never even mentioning the lymph system. And the kidneys are full of lymph. So it's very interesting. Do some research on shock on your stuff. Sorry about the color change on the text. Should have had it white the whole time. Okay, well, about 5 years ago, they started finally acknowledging the role of inflammation in heart disease, cancer, arthritis, everything. What they found validated my father's life's work. So I was really excited about that, and this was an article that I kept from a newspaper. They're talking about how inflammation hidden deep in the body is a common trigger. Well, we know what causes inflammation now. It's the extracellular fluid. Cells are functioning anaerobically. They generate a lot of heat. That's one of the things. Of course, coming up with a drug, inflammation. Yeah, okay. T.C. McDaniel, Dr. T.C. McDaniel, I did some research on albumin and zeta potential, and that website, you could spend 2 weeks on it if you just research zeta potential and Dr. T.C. McDaniel. It's incredibly fascinating. He had a product that you could just take, and it would clear your arteries out within 2 weeks. I asked him what it was, and he wouldn't tell me. And he's probably going to die with whatever that formula is. But you know what? I think it has to be something that comes right from what God made, because the sun's energy, and they always say without the sun's energy, life's impossible. Well, if you want the sun's energy, eat your raw foods and your sprouts and your raw grains and nuts and things like that. Nuts you got to be careful of because of mycotoxins, and high protein is not a good idea. And my dad was one of the first people to talk about the dangers of high protein all the way back in 1976. It's poisons on both sides of the molecule. It creates a lot of ammonia. It's not a good way to try and lose weight. Those people who are losing weight are going to end up with cancer and heart disease and whatever else. So anyway, look at all these claims he made. Wow, it's still on there. It says no need for heart bypass, no need for angioplasty, no need for replace valves, no need to amputate limbs, remove kidney stones, arrhythmia is corrected. And it's all related to what we're learning with applied lymphology, too. Only with what he's doing, we're going to teach you how to do it in another way. Here's another one. This was a Scientific American. Probably show it better if we didn't have overhead lights on, but that's all right. You wouldn't see me. Or anyway, this right here, I wanted to point out. There's a war going on in here. They're going to say that the immune system is to blame and that it's attacking whatever's in there. Actually, the white blood cells go in and they shoot their hydrogen peroxide, and that generates some heat too, because it starts to destroy those. They go in and they can't stay very long. So because they go in there, shoot their hydrogen peroxide and get the heck out, they think that they don't know what they're doing. But they have to get out of there so they can get some oxygen. It's a hostile environment in there. And they're not going to sit there and adapt and then become part of the problem. So all those cells in there say, hey, it's time to break down this body. The body is dead. They don't know any better. They're in a swampy lake. So, secret killer. It's interesting that they emphasize secret killer inflammation. I just thought that was funny. It says the same thing that causes your tissue around a splinter to turn red and causes swelling in an injured toe is the link to all these illnesses, so many illnesses, numerous illnesses. It's all common. We're finding common denominators, and it's no wonder. It's an article. Many experts now see inflammation as arising from an immune system that's out of control. Coming to a theater near you. Just kidding. Infection or injury triggers a chain of events called inflammatory cascade. The familiar signs of normal inflammation, fever, pain, swelling, are the first signals that your immune system is being called into action. Oh no, the immune system's going to get me. And this is, tumor means to swell. We're going to go a little bit over, but I can do that because I'm the last speaker. That's why I wanted to be that. Every disease is associated with inflammation, all the itises, that's why they literally mean. This is the lake, and that's represents the blood. The high blood pressure. Due to trapped plasma proteins, or blood proteins in the interstitial spaces, after you get 6 gallons of excess fluid in the body, you lose the negative pressure, which means you lose the dry state. In other words, you lose the healthy environment. We can have up to 20 gallons of excess fluid. That is like 5-gallon jugs in our body, 4 5-gallon jugs in your body. We can have even more than that, but that is a lot. What do most doctors know? Blood tests for mean albumin levels. 55 grams per liter. This is really interesting. Kenneth Seaton, he used to be a speaker at the National Health Freedom Conventions and things. He wrote quite a few articles and just a ton of research. He's the world's leading authority on albumin. And that is just highly relevant to applied lymphology and cellular ecology as well. But it turns out they can just do a blood test for you and they can find out how much albumin you have. Usually they do that because they want to know how much of a drug to give you. Because albumin has the ability to bind up and neutralize virtually the entire pharmacopoeia. And so they'll give you a little more than that so it'll act upon your body, not with it. The body's very intelligent, but they're always trying to circumvent that intelligence. Healthy, you'll live 125 years with 55 grams and 65 years with 39 grams. You get down to 39 grams, and it's related to all morbidity and mortality. They can pretty much tell how much longer or how resistant you are to infection and things like, or any disease. Albumin is the ultimate measure of health. Neutralize the pharmacopoeia. It begins as a blood plasma constituent. It goes to the interstitial spaces where it immediately becomes a constituent of extracellular fluid, to lymph, the majority of which becomes plasma once again. So it goes from being plasma to extracellular fluid around the cell, and then ideally, it should become lymph fluid immediately. Things aren't always ideal, right? Well, anyway, plasma, extracellular fluid, lymph gets purified, dumped right back into the bloodstream, plasma once again. And it's just filtration. It's a filtration system. 1 in every 400 albumin molecules is good enough to replenish the CSF, and it must be replenished 4 to 5 times per day to have mental health. All kinds of things get in the way of that. How much drugs that they're burdened with, electromagnetic field, an alarm clock right above your head. And don't put a baby on the other side of a wall where there's a television where it can sleep. It's in the middle of the division of those cells, the brain cell in particular. When all these cells are dividing, it's very vulnerable to those kinds of fields, and so errors can be made. Albumin enters the cell through a process called pinocytosis to provide a perfect balance of amino acids so the cell can increase in size and divide. I'm going to have to go really fast now. Vascular tree, the body is a sponge, majority of which must be maintained precisely. Water is held magnetically. Blood proteins are like a magnet to water. Cells contain very large amounts of proteins. Particularly the control and maintenance of blood plasma constituents is proven to be the key to the maintenance of the cellular environment. Zeta potential electrons coat the entire terrain. I already mentioned that. All molecules are in constant motion. It's referred to as heat. It was interesting, Kevin mentioned the ions. They did a study where the positive air ions decreased the electrophoretic mobility of your erythrocytes, or that's mean blood cells. In other words, the blood became a steric hindrance and started to slow down and cluster. The cats with negative air ions increased the circulation. So they already did that. They did the research. International Society of Lymphology, I told you about how that was formed. They usually debate things like crazy, but when my father gave them that life formula for life and death at cell level, they said, okay, let's take a break. What did you think about that? Mighty interesting, Dr. West. And then later, if you teach that formula, you will close hospitals. That's what they said. Well, Lymphatic Manifesto. That was written by John R. Castley Smith, who was a past president. It addressed 500 surgeons and scientists throughout the world. So the fact remains that many millions of people will suffer because of this widespread ignorance. Some will lose their lives, some will lose their limbs, many will suffer needless pain and incapacity. Many research workers will get incorrect results. All this through simple ignorance about the importance of the lymphatics. That's why they agreed to be on our advisory board at that time. Joseph Waltz was putting electrodes down the spine, bringing people out of wheelchairs, and it's unbelievable. And even cerebral palsy and MS, and we know why it works. Cancer is a form of pleomorphism, something that Bachamp talked about. Ultimate form of it, actually. Bjorn Nordstrom, he was dissolving tumors with electrodes. I'm going to show you some techniques real soon. And by the way, everyone here, I'm going to give you a link if you'll just send me an email that will have a demonstration video that's never been available on the internet until a few days from now. And then, so for the first time, people are going to be able to just watch this. It's a lot longer than I had today even. So you're going to learn a lot about what to do, okay? So everyone should be happy. All right, about that. Everyone that wants that, it'll be on there for a few weeks. Bjorn Nordstrom was the head of the hospital. He was on the Nobel Prize Committee, chairman. When he posted his theories, it was amazing how much his own colleagues ostracized him. And think about it. We have industry trampling over science. We've got a lot of people who are scared to stand outside of the consensus. That's not science. He had to go to China to finish his studies, last I heard. It was on Electric Man. I'll show you the article right there. It said he self-published a book called Biologically Closed Electric Circuits, and even his best friends totally ostracized him, and his credentials read like a who's who. Okay, Bjorn Nordstrom claims to have found in the body a heretofore unknown universe of electrical activity that's the very foundation of the healing process and is as critical to well-being as the flow of blood. If he is right, he's made the most profound biomedical discovery of the century. And all of a sudden, you don't hear anything about him anymore. Isn't that amazing? And I got about 5 more minutes, and then I want to tell everyone about the materials and how they can go learn more and things like that. Body's electrical, you know, knowledge of the truth increases faith. Cells can repair extremely fast in the dry state because the damaged membrane reacts with the calcium ions, and it's like that. It says, let me read it to you because that didn't sound the best. Whenever the membrane of a cell becomes ruptured, some of the cytoplasm streams out of the opening. That's everything in the cell. However, before it can flow far into the surrounding fluids, a surface precipitation reaction occurs. That is, surface proteins precipitate on the surface, and fatty materials immediately become entrapped, thereby forming a new structure that is essentially identical with the original membrane. So if I were to smash my finger with a hammer, I could take both my fingers and I could have you smash both of them with a hammer. I can grab onto one and let the other just swell. And I'll hold on to this one till about 95% of the pain is gone. I'll let this one, if I just let that one swell up, maybe someday I'll do this, but I'll let that one swell up. I could lose my fingernail here. On this one, it will swell up. It won't turn black and blue. And when I'm done, about most of the pain's gone, I'll start stroking it. This activates lymphatic vessels. It pulls out the extracellular fluid. It puts energy in there, frees up the clustered proteins, pulls out the histamine and bradykinin, brings them back in the dry state. The cells get oxygen. They rotate the minerals continually. They can reproduce and heal incredibly fast. And within 5 to 10, 15 minutes or so, I will have a brand new finger on this hand and one that's black and blue going to lose its fingernail on the other. Now, anything that you can do to heal your finger, you can use those same techniques to heal an organ, maybe a different way of doing it, but you can heal the body heals exactly the same process. The degenerative disease process is the death process. The healing process is the life process. By it, you know, you're going to enable one or you're going to allow the other. But if you, what I was going to say is that the process is virtually identical at the cell level. You've got, you know, that's the basic unit, right? And then you have blood and lymph. And everything that's related between the blood and lymph, you're going to need to know all that. For ourselves, because believe it or not, in almost any circumstance you can imagine yourself being in, you have more ability, more opportunity, and more motivation to heal your own body than anyone else on the face of this earth. Even if you're lying in bed with a broken back, you can even be paralyzed. In fact, I had a young man with a broken back. I'm going to get in a couple techniques for you here. It was a broken 7th vertebra, and the family had the materials, and so they were working on them. Now, what they did, the earth has an electromagnetic field. I already pointed out the body's electrical. You have basically a light socket right here. There's a lot of lymph right in here. And we were tied to our mother's blood and lymph when we were in the womb. And so my father would tap into that. It was really revolutionary stuff. And then he would also, then he would do other things. And within seconds of tapping into these things and using these bioelectric techniques, backs and necks, the back would align, hips would go into place. But he said, you know, that's not permanent. There's still that problem there. So you have to do it often enough to keep that condition from coming back. And that's the secret. So when these people were working on them, they worked on them. I'm going around. Notice I'm going around like this, and I'm going down a path. That's cyclonic pooling of these electrons down a path. And it's going through the Earth's magnetic field, and I'm generating and concentrating that down the back, and it's causing a sweeping effect through the interstitial spaces. And there gets to be these larger areas where it gets into, like, think of those terminals, like dustpans, and you want to sweep the floor. You sweep everything into one pile, right? And then you use the dustpan to pick it up. Well, we're sweeping those interstitial spaces, activating lymphatic vessels, putting the energy in there and pulling out all that fluid. So he was totally out of pain that night after breaking his back. And of course, when he woke up in the morning, he was in pain again because no one was working on him. So I said, and this is where you're all going to benefit from my new stuff. But Dad always said deep breathing, rebounding, stroking, compressing tissues, and energy. But when you've got a broken back, no one's going to rebound you. And no one's going to be there all night stroking on you. I mean, stroking your back and holding, pressing the tissue, and whatever else, energy work. They won't be able to do that all night long. So this young man needed to know that he needed to keep the pain out, because if you allow that to come back, think of it like a car alarm for the blood capillaries. Anytime you have pain, you know there's going to be swelling, because that's where the excessive filtration happens. So he, throughout the night, I taught the young man, first of all, the principle, don't let the pain come back. So in and out of wakefulness throughout the night the next day. And I'm out of pain when they went home, and he worked on himself all night. In and out of wakefulness, I taught him to do the yawning, and there's stretching. Just that little motion right there. Compressing tissues, and compressing and relaxation of tissue. In and out of, so yawning, stretching, flexation, and relaxation, which I call isometric lymphosizing. He was just doing all these things. He woke up totally out of pain. Lo and behold, he was on a wave runner within 30 days. Being crazy again. He's going to break his back again. No. But it just goes to show you. And I want you all to try something. If you'll, this is a new technique, and then I'm going to talk about the materials and everything. It's okay if the video shuts off and doesn't get all this, because, if you'll just think, okay, you want to move this lymph. We're going to try moving the lymph fluid in everyone here. I'm going to try moving the lymph fluid from the tips of your toes and tips of your fingers all the way to this thoracic duct. And then we're going to take a deep breath, and it'll we'll shoot it into the bloodstream where it belongs. But everyone's got some fluid around your cells, especially if you've been sitting down all this time. So why don't you just relax completely and think of the tips of your toes. Put your feet out there really slow. We want to move this like a wave on the ocean. So we're going to start by curling our toes, and you're not going to move any other muscle. Try to just curl your toes and not move anything else. So you curled your toes. Now I want you to point your toes. Point your toes without flexing your hamstrings if you can. Once you've done that, I want you to pull your toes towards your knees. Okay? Now, I want you to try and dig your heel into the floor so that you're working your hamstrings. You're going to flex your hamstrings. Now that you've done that, point your toes lift your feet into the air so you're flexing these quadriceps. Okay, you've done that. Now do an abdominal crunch, little abdominal crunch. Now begin to arch your back and bring your shoulders together, shoulder blades together. Okay, there you go. Wow, isn't that feel great? Now bring your elbows together in front of you. And take the deepest breath you can possibly take. Sustain it if you want at the peak, even. And when you hold, you're not really holding your breath, but you're sustaining the inhalation. Your alveoli all becomes independent of each other, and it starts to get electrically independent of each other, and it will absorb more oxygen from the rest of the night or whatever throughout the day. So, and then you just feel it. Do you feel it? It's great. So anything you do to relax a muscle, you can use that to heal an organ. That's like I said. And there's a ways that my dad would demonstrate the techniques for the hips and everything. He'd have people sitting in a chair and he'd bring their feet up. Usually one leg was longer than the other. If they were the same, then he'd just move. No, I'm kidding. No, but one leg was longer than the other. And then he knew what side the problem was on. One part of the back was really tight and the other one was in pain. So he'd figure out where it was. If the pain was over here, he knew the problem was over here for some reason. So what he found was that when he was measuring their hips, and he put a ruler over there so everyone could see, that if he put his hands down, it would just go right into place. Because the energy from his hands was enough to put it right into place. So he was careful because he wanted people to see that it was out. But when he had them tap in with their left hand on that navel area where a lot of it's like a light socket, and just put their hand on the other shoulder, which was usually, you know, they got a tight side and you got an injured side. And that is you're tapping in and you're putting the energy into your neck here. So he knew, and he teaches this on the videos, how to put your own back and neck in place. This is all they had to do. And then their feet lined up.